This is tips number 836, which is part 2 of my 6-part series on the ATLAS gear cutting attachment. This part is entitled Making the Index Glide Slide. Be sure and watch all 6 parts when available. Howdy again, it's Mr. Pete, your interweb YouTube shop teacher, and this is part 2 of a multi-part video series where I am making a gear cutting fixture that can be used on a lathe, particularly an ATLAS lathe, using the milling attachment, and the device will go right here into the vise of the attachment, allow you to cut gears, to index gears on a lathe rather than a milling machine. So I hope you have watched part 1 where I made this portion of it, and today I'm going to start on another part. There are blueprints that will be at the end of the video of the part that I'm making if anyone is interested, so let's begin. Remember, there are 3 versions of the blueprints. This is the one from Casting Specialties. This is the one from ATLAS, the original, kind of hard to see. And then there's a third one sent to me by a viewer of the entire assembly here. So again, this is a review here. This is what I am making. I've already made the main part here, and today we're doing this upright part. I'm not sure what the name is. I'll get back to you in a second, but let me show you a couple of separate drawings just of this part, and that's what we're concerned with today. On the Casting Specialties drawing, this part is called the guide slide, and there it is with all of the dimensions. Now I will depart slightly from dimensions as needed depending on my tooling and the materials available to you. Now let me show you another version of that. This is the original drawing from ATLAS from 1939, the same part. You may notice some differences between the two, but apparently Clarence Struck pretty much copied this verbatim. And all the dimensions, just minor changes, but I believe it is a copy. I did find a better copy of this blueprint showing the complete title block here, and you can see the date, 1939, the year that Hitler invaded Poland with the Blitzkrieg. And finally, here's the drawing contributed by a viewer, also dimensioned. Notice that they have squared off the end of the slot. There really is no good way to do that. Mine will be rounded other than filing it if necessary, but the slot can be made slightly longer if needed as well. I did a couple things off camera while you were sleeping last night, and one of them is that I laid out this hole here, and that is shown in the drawing, but it might be a slightly different size. It's 1¼ inch from the end, not from the end of this, but from the end of the block itself. And I drilled it and tapped it 5/16 18. You can make it any size you want. I found this old knob, and I've got a whole drawer full of knobs and things like that, but this is the one that I'm going to use as a lock. So each time a tooth is cut and we index, I would lock this to the shaft so it cannot move. And in order to not put a mark on the shaft, 2 things. For one thing, there will be a recess or an undercut, but secondly, I like to do this. So I put a piece of brass stock that's 3/16 stock, and I drilled a hole in the end of this. Not an easy thing to do to get it on center, but you get the gist, and many people use that, including here on the beautiful rose index where there's a cap screw with the brass end so it will not mar the work. Well, that's not required, but at the end of the video there'll be some extra credit. I want to show you a little trick that I use in order to drill a hole, because this can't be held in the lathe properly. Alright, let's move on. As I said, I have many tons of metal, steel, and aluminum around the shop, but often I can't find what I wanted. So I have already cut to size the piece that I am going to use for the guide slide, and there it is. But I started out with hot roll. I do not like using hot roll, but it's what I've got, 3/8 thick. This is wider than I needed. Now another thing about hot roll, I don't like the black scale, but you always got this rounded mill edge. So I cut this down, but first of all I took a cut on the mill to square it off and clean it up. Then I laid it out, and this is 1¼ inch wide, I believe, 1.5 inch wide. So I milled the other side. Then I laid it out, and right here on this line is going to be drilled a 1-inch hole. Now they call for reaming it, but I don't see the need for reaming it. It's just a clearance hole that's going to go around here. And then of course we have to drill and tap 4 holes in here and 4 clearance holes here and the slot. So I haven't done any of the other layout now. Let's talk about drilling a large hole. Now I've talked till I'm blue in the face about silver and Deming bits, but when we get into larger bits, larger drills on small machinery, it isn't all that easy to do. I wish I had one of those annular cutters, but I am going to use a 1-inch silver and Deming, which will be a little bit oversized, but that won't matter, and you'll see why as this progresses. Now you can do this any way you want, but I do not like drilling big holes on relatively small machines because we do not have taper spindles or any of that, and I can't slow these machines down. You need a real slow spindle speed for a 1-inch bit. So let's explore some other possibilities, shall we? Alright, what do you think about drilling this big hole on the drill press here? But in order to do that, of course, I had to remove one of the jaws, so I'll only actually be tightening it with these 2 jaws, and then I'll drill right through. So what do you think about that? Well, Mr. Pete, don't you think that's dangerous? Won't that fly out of there and either kill or maim you? Well, you know, I'm getting pretty sick of this alter ego giving me suggestions, but I think he's probably right because this jaw isn't holding anything. It's just these 2 jaws. And also I noticed if a lot of pressure is put against this, it could be pushed in like that. So maybe my alter ego is correct. Let's go over to the milling machine, shall we? Okay, take a look here at the setup on the Bridgeport mill. Notice that I'm on thin parallels. If you use thick parallels, you might strike the parallels. Also watch that one of your parallels doesn't walk on you a little bit and you drill into it and damage the drill, the work, and the parallels. So that's my setup. The height doesn't matter so much. I'm not going to use the digital readout here. I'm just going to locate it with the wiggler. I do like this wiggler, which can be used just as a pointer or an edge finder with a ball on there. I don't know what brand that is, but this is the only one that I have ever seen. Okay, I'm right on and ready to drill. And I'll lock the table. Okay, a 1/4 inch starter drill. And a 3/8 drill bit. Let's see how this big old 1-inch Chinesium silver and Deming drill will handle this from a 3/8 up to a 1-inch. I'm in back gears at about 80 RPM with just a dash of oil on it. Let's see. Let's see, Mr. Pete. Don't you think that's a lot safer than what you suggested in your insane monologue? Yeah, I guess it is. So there it is, a 1-inch hole. Let's see if the piece part fits in there. So the whole idea now is that this turned down portion has to fit into that 1-inch hole. Will it do it? Or will it be too sloppy? Oh my gosh. Perfecto Garcia Queen. Perfect. Let me take it out and deburr it. Let's go over to the bench again, shall we? Do some layout. Wow, does that ever fit Nice, doesn't it? And I took out a 1-inch reamer just for the heck of it, and that Chinesium drill was right on. Just the fit that I want. So I didn't want to have to ream with one of these. That's a man killer with a hand reamer. So you might be wondering why I didn't do all the layout, because we still have to lay out the slot and 4 holes here. Because sometimes when you're drilling large holes, those big chips come around just like a wire brush and remove some of your hard-earned layout. So I'll lay out just the length of this slot because the milling machine is already set on center. I can just plop this right back in and start milling that 3/8 slot. And if the slot ends up a little too wide, no problemo, I'll just make this other part to fit. This layout isn't very critical at all. So the slot is 1/4 from the end and 3 1/4 from the other end. So I've got a couple of squares set up here already, and I'm just going to use my fine tip marker for this because it just doesn't matter really. Although that doesn't show up very well, does it? And this is the 3 1/2. You know what, I think I'll rescribe that with a sharp scribe because that just doesn't show up red on blue, does it? See you over at the mill again. At the milling machine now, and notice I raised it up a little bit higher, mainly for photographic purposes. These are thicker parallels, but yet there's still space in there. Now that's to be a 3/8 slot, and this is the 3/8 end mill, but I'm going to mill it out first with an 11/32 end mill. Why? Because otherwise I get a finish that's just rougher than a cob. So if I rough it out with this and then finish with this, I think it'll be pretty smooth on both sides of the slot. Now I just got to kind of worry this away. Probably would be better to drill a couple starter holes there, but I'm not in the mood. Okay, I'm all the way through with the smaller end mill. Now I'll put the 3/8 end mill in there and I'll finish it up. No need to show you that. Okay, the slot turned out fine. This is a 3/8 shank here, so it's a little bit rough in there. So I will make the other piece to fit, as I said, or file it just a little bit. And as I was saying earlier, that when you mill a slot like that, often one side is rougher than the other because one side is being climb milled and the other is conventional milling, and you always get a little bit better finish on the climb mill side. Now this is a 3/8 lathe tool, and it's a little tight. It's not going to slide, so the other part has to be made just a little bit underside. All right, enough on that. Let me lay out the 4 holes, and I don't like the dimensions. I'm going to use 10/24 cap screws, and they'll be counterbored. The drawing calls for 1/4 inch 20 countersunk, and those would break way out. I don't like countersunk stove bolts. They look like heck. This looks more professional, and they'll be below the surface. So let me lay those out, and I've already experimented on the back side, and I found out that 3/16 in and 3/16 up is what I want. So that'll be the location of the holes. I will lay out all 4 of them on this side off camera, and I love to use, as you know, get yourself a height gauge. Get yourself a height gauge. It's just the best thing since butternut sliced bread. Well, I guess I'm ending up showing you here how to do it. I have to find the dimension for up here, do a little calculations, but that locates them. I'll have to extend that line a little bit. All right, that's enough on that. Okay, I thought I better show you the final layout here. So these are the 4 holes here. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Over the years, I have shown you several different methods of getting the holes to match up. So we got clearance holes in this piece, and we have threaded holes in this piece, and everything has to line up, and that's not always an easy job to do. So there are many ways of doing that. I have shown you before how to use transfer punches in one method, transfer screws in another method. You also can drill the holes in this piece, the steel piece, with the digital readout, and the other piece with a digital readout. I don't really like doing that, so I'm going to drill the tap drill hole all the way through the steel as an assembly here and into the aluminum extra deep, and then after all four are done, I can take the steel piece off and I can drill the clearance holes in there and then tap the holes in the aluminum. Everything will line up then. Do you get what I'm talking about? Now, my dad taught me when I was 16 years old, and I made this in 1960, the Stewart steam engine, but that's how I laid out and drilled these 6 holes here, and these 6, that was all done on a drill press, Delta drill press, and same thing here. So there was a lot of lining up to do, and you couldn't spoil a piece because these castings came from England. So use whatever method you want, but I'm showing you a little bit different method than what I usually use, but it is foolproof. Well, not really, because fools are so ingenious. Okay, take a look at a rather unorthodox setup, and this is how I want to do it. Notice that the aluminum housing is in the vise, perfectly vertical. I checked it with a square, and then on top of it is the slide. Now, to keep the slide from twisting as I drill, I have mounted temporarily a drill press vise on there. That just clamps the two of them together. I did have to use a little shim here, but it's tighter than a bull's hind end in blowfly season. It's not going anyplace. Now, I had to change some of the dimensions here on the hole locations from the drawing. The drawing was not right, at least not for the size that I'm going to use. So I made a little living blueprint here. I don't know if it makes any sense to you. I've already found the edges and set my digital readout, and the first hole from the vise here is in 0.187, that's 3/16. Then it'll be another 1 1/8 to the next one, and I'm already in 3/16 for this line, so I'm ready to drill this hole. Now the same will be true with this hole and this hole. The distance over from the other line will be 1.125. I'm having trouble reading it. Does that make any sense at all to you? Now I'm going to drill 5 30-second hole all the way through the steel and into the aluminum, a total of 1 inch. That's longer than what I need, but I do not like dealing with shallow blind holes when I tap, and you won't either. Now I'm drilling the first hole, and I have set the digital readout for 0 and 0 in the X and Y, and I will locate from that. So let me start this hole real quickly. To repeat myself, this is a 5 30-second drill, and I did put a piece of tape on there as a depth stop, crude but effective. And now I will move the work 1.125, that's 1 1/8 inch for the next hole. And I'm looking at the digital readout. You cannot see it, of course. I always lock the table in every new location. Now I will locate and drill the other 2 holes off camera because it's just the same old thing. I'll save you the pain of watching me. Okay, all 4 holes are drilled and I'm really ready to take it out. But before you ever remove your work from a setup like this, think about it. Is there anything else that needs to be done in that same setup? Because you would never be able to get it set up exactly the same again. Notice here that I have put index marks on there. See the 2 red lines? That's the way I want it to be assembled when I actually install it and start cutting gears. Just in case there is any misalignment here and it would be off in other directions. Depends, I don't know how accurately I worked, and it doesn't matter when you use this method. It really is a great method. Several more things to do here. I have to counterbore these 4 holes to accommodate the socket head cap screws. They're 1024, ½ inch long. Somebody gave me a whole bag of them. Thank you to whoever that was, because I had a box of 3/4 long and they're just a little bit too long for what I'm going to do here. But look at how nice that those holes ended up being, just nothing close to the edge where it might break through. Now I'm going to tap all 3 of those holes. Remember, they were extra deep, 1024 taper tap. Now if that leaves too much taper at the bottom, I'll run a plug tap in there off camera. You don't need to see that. But with the extra deep hole, you can avoid using the dreaded bottoming tap. Always use some lubricant. I like WD-40. I like a kerosene or this on aluminum. And tap as straight as you can, but I tell you what, when you use a taper tap, it sure helps you tap straight. But I like to eyeball it. You won't be able to see me do this, but I'm looking from this direction to see that it is square, and from this direction. You don't want to tap a crooked hole. And you'll feel it hit bottom. But don't hit bottom too hard. You'll never remove a broken tap and it will spoil your day, possibly your whole week. And I'm on the bottom, I can feel it. I'll back it out and do the other 3 off camera. Okay, all 4 holes are tapped. I'll blow them out, and I'll also use a file and make sure there's no burrs on the top. Get everything good and clean, and then that's basically done, at least for now. Okay, I drilled 1 hole, the clearance size, which is 3/16. As you can see, the screw will fit in there nicely. If you're having trouble doing your alignment, go 1 size larger than 3/16, or whatever your size is. And now I'll do the other 3 off camera, but another point I wanted to make here, might be irrelevant, but I've had this for years, but I love the black with the white lettering. For tired old eyes that have cataracts and are 79 years old, this type can be much harder to read, especially when they're tarnished. So get one of these. This one's marked Hansen. I don't know who sells them. This has been around for a while. Be right back. Okay, all 4 holes have been opened up to 3/16, and so we need to get the burrs off the back, so I like to file. And then I love this. I've had this forever. There's a pin in there so it won't roll all over the bench. Very handy to remove burrs. You don't need to remove the burrs on the front side because we're going to counterbore that right now, aren't we? What do you mean we? You're thinking. Okay, now I'm going to counterbore all 4 holes, and this is the counterbore that I'm going to use. It has a 3/16 pilot. And how deep will I go? Well, not real critical, as long as it's plenty deep, but not too deep. I go all the way through, but it looks like about 1/4 inch deep, just a little bit over. And if you do not have a counterbore, you will use a 5/16 drill. That'll do the job. It just will not give you a flat bottom hole. So you can see the diameter here is right around 5/16. So that's how you need to do it if you don't have a set of these. Don't bother to buy these. They're expensive unless you use them very often or can get them used like I did. I'm over at the Walker Turner drill press. The counter bore is in the chuck. The work is in the vise, and I brought it all the way down till it's touching. And now I will set my stop for 1/4 inch deep. And here's a good way to do it. If I can get the camera up just a little bit, I will bring this knurled knob down to a 1/4 inch square, maybe just a little bit more, make it sloppy, and the depth will be just right. Do you understand what I mean by using the depth stop here? You don't want to go too deep. And let's check it out here. It goes in just right, so it's a little bit below the surface. And we still got plenty of thread on that side. Now I'll do the other three off camera. The casting specialties, by the way, the CS stands for Casting Specialties and Clarence Struck, the owner. Anyway, this drawing calls for 1/4-20 screws. The other drawing from Atlas calls for the 10/24, but these are 1/4 inch, and you can see that there's just no way there would be room for those, especially a 1/4 flathead. The head is so bodacious, so use 10/24s or even 8/32s if you have a notion, or it depends on what you have, but don't use too large of a screw. Let me go ahead and put this on and see what it looks like. But before I do that, I'm going to round these corners off as per the drawing, and I'll just do that on the belt sander, no big deal. Okay, let's see if these 4 holes line up. Okay, that worked perfectly. So use that method if you ever want holes to line up. It really is foolproof. I put a couple index marks there because that's the way I always want it assembled. And remember that it may be necessary for me to square the ends of this slot off at some time, or to lengthen it. Well, we really will not know until I put the whole blame thing together. Another thing I did here, I took my little half-round Swiss file and I did deburr the corners here and all along here on both sides. So I believe that this is done, at least to this point. So that concludes this video, part 2. Be sure and watch part 3 when I work on the next part. Now, for those of you that were naughty, you have to stay after class for extra credit, and I'll talk just a minute or two about how to drill the hole in here for the brass plug if you're interested. If not, there are a ton of pictures at the end, still pictures. Watch those. Subscribe and like if you want to, and I'll see you in part 3. Thank you very much for watching and supporting my channel. This is Mr. Pete saying so long for now, except of course for you bad boys. I know it looks simple and maybe it's not worth talking about, but did you ever try to drill a hole and get it centered in a little rod or a little piece like this? Because this can't be held in a 3-jaw chuck because the knob is molded around it. So if you need to do that, and just visualize putting this in the drill press and trying to drill a hole in the center. You know, you wouldn't do it. So here's what I came up with. I took a 5/16 coupling nut, 5/16 18, extra long, available at any hardware store. And I took a 5/16 bolt, do not use a grade 5, and just cut off a short piece like that. And I put this in the lathe, and I drilled it with a center drill and then a 3/16 bit so that the 3/16 brass rod would fit in it. But actually what I made here is a little jig. So screwing this into the nut and then taking the nut and screwing it onto the thread here. Now the brass is already in there, but I would bring that all the way down and then just put this in the drill press and drill it 3/16 and it would perfectly center, and it did perfectly center the hole in this little stud. And then again use some 3/16 rod, cut it off just to, I don't know what the length is, you figure it out. Doesn't need to be very long. Mine was such a good fit I did not need to Loctite it. You may need to. I might have reamed it. I just did this a few days ago, so I really don't know. So was that little tip there worth mentioning or not? And then that'll be thrown away because I never would find it if I needed it again. I wouldn't even remember that I did it unless I went back and watched my video. Boy, am I fired up from that Coca-Cola that I had with my egg sandwich. This is Mr. Pete, at your service, and I'll see you in part 3. Thanks for watching again. And you guys can go home now. Tell your mom what you